Okay, well, welcome, Seb. Nice to see you again.
Thank
For
you.
those of you who are watching, we had Sebastian and Society Company on at last year's Climate Summit, so it's nice to have you back again. Obviously, this time talking about something slightly different and
Obviously,
for everyone to hear all the work that you guys have been doing over the last year. So I'll just hand it over to you and let you quickly introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about Society Company.
hi guys. For those that may not know me, I'm Sebastian Ross, and I was the founder of the Society Company. And Namisha has been involved in some of those online in helping to create just what it is and where we are today. And we were in a pivotal moment, I think, as a society, really, over the last 18 months, and we had to react quite quickly to some of those concerns, and I felt that we were quite well placed to be able to do that. Like every other company in the world, had our fair share of challenges, but I feel that we came through it, and we're in a fantastic position, really, to be able to offer something a little bit different in regards to what's out there and how people consume today. So thank you, Namisha, for giving us this opportunity. And I'm looking forward to speaking a little bit more about what we do in due course.
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So, um, I know last time when we spoke at the Climate Summit, we were talking a lot around, I believe it was goal 12, which is responsible consumption and production. And I think, it's the same one we're talking about again today. But I think when I came across Society Company, I felt like you were addressing many goals, not just, just one or two specifically. But I think for the benefit of the audience, it might be helpful for you to kind of anchor how SOCO fits into the UN SDGs and why does, of course, climate action matter so much to you as a company?
I think we're all experiencing, and we've had a bit of time to think about our own consumption and the wider way in which we affect the world over the last year. But I think if you talk to most people will agree that the way that we shop is broken, and we're spending thousands of pounds and hundreds of hours at the supermarket producing nothing really but plastic waste that doesn't benefit our pocket or planet. So the Society Company was on a mission really to try and address those problems, both for the customer, but to do it in a different way, a way that it hasn't been done before, and do it collectively. Because if you take the average household and see it in a collective sense, so the street where you live on, Namisha, or where you'll be sending your kids to school, or where you go to church, or where you go to work, just 500 households will produce 1.5 million pounds that they will spend, and 4 years of time that will be spent at the supermarket, collectively producing 20 tons worth of single-use plastic. And that's just in a street or a small community setting. And I think we can all agree that that's wasteful. So we're interested in seeing where we can, through a circular economy, minimize the plastic waste of that collective to maximize the revenue that comes back to that community. Because we give 15p out of every pound back to a community that buys from us. So that street of 500 households, or the school or the church or the office, out of that 1.5 million, they could have access to almost £250,000 every year. And I think that that's a really exciting thing to follow. And we'd like that money in the long term to be able to go towards climate action. So creating energy for that particular street or community. But we're at the beginning stages of really trying to get that power back, and really put the money back into where it can be used most usefully.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think something that probably is a big thread amongst all the work that you do is self-sufficiency. So it's a lot around helping communities be self-sustaining, self-sufficient almost. Um, so I think one of the things I know that the audience would be curious to know about is, how did you come up with this idea? So what was it? I mean, obviously you've touched on a number of points, but it's usually one or some sort of instance that triggers these sorts of ideas or businesses to come about. So what was that for you?
I think it was over a period of about 10 years, and really probably being exposed to different communities throughout my life. You know, I grew up the son of a preacher man, in growing up in the bell tower of a church and seeing just the power of a community and what they can do. So I think seeing that from an early age, and also becoming exposed professionally to the type of technologies that are coming online. And I wanted to be able to leverage those technologies in an area where I saw a sort of a sleeping giant with communities, where there's a huge amount of underused assets. There's a huge amount of commitment and trust, all of which is being underused and undervalued. And if people can benefit from the profits and the purchases that they make and get back the power of those profits, then I think the world will be in a much better place. So I think over the course, to answer your question, I think there wasn't one thing. I think it was over the course of a series of different lifetime events and roles that I had in my life that sort of led me to a eureka moment about 2 years ago, where I felt that the world had shifted slightly on its axis. And to be perfectly honest with you, I think the way to answer it directly, I think there are strong economic and political technological forces that have combined with a greater capacity to produce and consume locally. And this is going to change how we relate to the place where we live. And I thought rooting sustainability in the local context is the key to creating these communities of the future. And it was really around the timing. I think you'll agree that most companies succeed based on a certain amount of timing and luck. And I felt the timing was right for this one.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when I first met you guys and found out what it is that you were doing, one of the things that stood with me the most was exactly what you said. It's about empowering community to take a certain type of action rather than constantly relying on somebody else to do it, for example. So it's, how do we create those models which allow all of us as a collective community, whether it's like me on my street or, somebody in the middle of London through a school, kind of really redirect finance, profit, and utilize assets. So it was really promising. And from those promising ideas, obviously, I'm curious to know, and I'm sure other people are as well, how has that gone? So, the company's almost 2 years old now, and yeah, I'm just curious to see, like, what's the response been from people who.
Oh, I missed that last part, just broken up a little.
No problem. So what I was asking was, what is the typical response you get from people when you tell them about Soco and the idea?
I think there's a realization with people that they have the power already within their pocket. So they're already buying everything they need to eat, clean, and care for their family and home. They're just not buying the best products at the best prices. So if we can fix that in a way that has the profits being redirected to a cause that they care about, namely their community, it's a win-win. All of the assets are there to be able for communities to really thrive. It's just we're not working together maybe as efficiently as we could. And the society company is there to really make you the hero, or your community the hero, so you can understand how much plastic you've saved and how much money you've raised. But we're going to do all the heavy lifting, the logistics, the providing of product. And we're quite clear in regards to the products that we choose, that they want to be the most ethical and sustainable version of what you're looking for. And while we don't give a huge amount of choice, we do try and find the best version. And I think that's what people want. People don't necessarily want to choose between 10 to 15 types of peanut butter, or go through the hassle of researching which one has palm oil, which one doesn't, which one was sustainably grown or organic. We do that also, and it's a mark of the type of brands that we've taken and the process that we go through to choose our products, that really saves that customer a little bit of time. And most people want to buy the most ethical product now. I think, as you can agree, not just the people who are on this call, I think it's not just a trend. I think people want their products to stand for something a little bit more than just great taste. They have to be well made and ethically sourced.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And then on the subject of customers and also that whole, wanting more sustainably sourced products, are you finding that your customers are asking you for that, or are they actually telling you this makes my life really convenient? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to understand, and probably what a lot of people who'd be seeing this would want to know, is, as a citizen, sometimes these things as like sourcing sustainable products matter, and sometimes they don't. But do you find your customers come to you because it matters to them, or are they a mixed bag of it's still a matter of convenience and you make it easy for me?
The three big problems with customers when it comes to product is price, convenience, and really impact. Price, there is still price sensitivity within the market, and ethical products are priced around 30% higher than other competitors. Now, we try and address that by actually minimizing the amount of choice you have within a certain product. So peanut butter, perfect example. If we just buy one, and everybody in all the different communities choose that as their peanut butter, the economies of scale will drive that price down. So we're fixing price for the end consumer. When it comes to convenience, we shifted our model away from delivering straight to communities where they would pick it up to a more convenient one, which was home delivery. Now, we got helped along by the pandemic in that particular regard, but I think that's where we need to stay. We've just done a deal with DHL to really allow us to expand nationwide, and we're excited to be able to offer this in communities in Dundee or the Isle of Wight, not just in London, where we currently serve. I think convenience still is a huge element. If it's not saving you time or money, unfortunately, it doesn't matter how good it is for the planet. The majority of people won't choose it. And when it comes to that last one, impact, I feel that this is a gaping hole within the industry, especially when it comes to products. Not being able to correctly quantify the impact that you're making, either as an individual or a collective, is an issue. Because we all know that greenwashing is the new corporate playbook, and it's far too easy with a set of branding guidelines to be able to make yourself look green while not really being so. It's creating a lot of confusion within all spaces, not just fast moving consumer goods. And if we started with food, cleaning and care, because this is ubiquitous and it holds an emotional attachment to people, and the frequency with which people need it. It's a hard space to operate in, especially delivering these products with a zero plastic waste, which is one of our USPs. But we're interested, and we've built a brand that we feel isn't just tied to those particular products. It can be really anything, whether that's the energy that you use or the provider, or the holiday that you want to go on, or pretty much anything that you buy. We feel you should be able to access the most green version of that. You can get it at the best price, and also that the money should come back, and a portion of the profit should come back to benefit the community that you love. And we're excited that the brand could move into those different verticals. But what we're really concentrated is really making sure that this model can grow.
Yeah, no, I think that's really positive. So moving slightly away from society company in terms of what it serves, and talking a little bit more about kind of the wider context of climate change, climate action. How do you feel your company responds to that? We have obviously the product in itself, but I'm keen to understand maybe what do you have planned for the future, not just from a product perspective, but as a company when it comes to climate action, climate change.
So climate change, I don't know if everybody has watched the Tipping Points documentary that was recently on Netflix, but I think there's a fear that's reaching fever pitch, I think, with people in regards to, we understand that we need to change and people don't necessarily know how to. We feel that the society company is quite well placed over the next couple of years to offer certain solutions. And these don't necessarily have to be in-house. We've worked very well with our product partnerships within fast-moving consumer goods, everything that you need to eat, clean, care for your family and home. We didn't create, we curated the best eco suppliers for that and just produced it in a zero plastic waste form. We'd be looking to address these type of issues in the same way by tying up and partnering with the best solutions. I think where we fit in is really being able to curate and present the best possible option for the consumer to be able to buy what they need in a way that they know and they feel and can see how much impact it's made. Further along, outside of more of a marketplace, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier in how do we create or allow communities to become the producers of their own energy and to use this money to really grow their own food. That's where it starts to get really exciting. And I think with these tipping points and the potential breakdown of social norms, look, we've just been through a year and a half of where we never thought we'd ever live through, and it changed literally like that overnight. And our customers, we delivered what before we thought was just, you know, an average sort of subscription box of eco products, but that was the essentials. It's what people needed and they couldn't get them anywhere else. And in this period we held really strong. We might have bent, but we didn't break. And we think that this isn't the first, this is probably the first major test that we have to face, but it certainly won't be the last. And we have the strong intention to be there every step of the way, not just over this next decade, but moving forward, to be able to work out innovative solutions where to allow these communities to actually create a self-sustaining and resilient life for themselves, because I think that's going to be more necessary in the future than maybe some of us would like to believe.
Yeah, no, I agree. Then one of the other questions I also had was, when you talk about climate change, in your opinion, and because you've obviously seen this from a different lens, having worked with so many suppliers to build or curate this whole roster of products, how prepared do you think London is for as you described, the changes we have to do on a societal level. I mean, we're here at London Climate Action Week. We're talking about climate change. We're talking about solutions. You're delivering a solution. How much of that is preparedness of the actual citizens of London? And what's your opinion on that?
I don't think we are. I think, the best example is, and I know I touched on it before, but when there were no food, when there was no food on the shelves, everybody lost their mind. And this probably won't be the last time we have to face a situation like that, whether it's Brexit or whether it's something more to do with climate. I think these type of scenarios are going to become quite thick and fast, whether people like to admit it or not. I think the onus is on us to prepare for that type of world and to be agile and flexible enough to think about ways that are sustainable for those communities to be able to thrive, not just survive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I really don't think London, I don't genuinely believe the world is very much prepared for what climate change is supposed to bring. Not supposed to, it is bringing us right now. It's still interesting. Some people still refer to it as that's what will happen. And I'm like, well, it's kind of happening already. So when we talk about, or at least the theme for us through this entire summit has been a lot about building resilience and making sure that from a citizen's point of view, they understand what action they can take. Because as you can imagine, it can be quite overwhelming when you're, approached with so many things. There's like an existential crisis. And then it's like, now you must change everything you do about your day-to-day life. So
Yeah.
and I guess COVID was kind of a test bed for can humans cope with like drastic change?
Yeah.
But when you bring all of that together, I think some of the things that I found most difficult to address as an entrepreneur working in this space is actually overcoming the cultural like programming that people have where they still think that this is not a problem or that, yeah, I'll get someone else to deal with it. And I know that's more of a kind of proverbial discussion, but I'm always eager to understand from people like yourself who've obviously started these businesses for a true purpose. How do you address culture that is so programmed to not sort this problem out?
We're all creatures of habit,
Yeah.
and change is really, really difficult. It can be forced upon us, and luckily, while we are still creatures of habit, I do think we are quite adaptable. So I think there's reasons for hope in regards to how quickly we can change when we really want to. It's just how much more evidence do we need to readdress or redirect the correct amount of funds into green tech? How much evidence do we need from scientists to make certain officials change the way that they've set up the tax codes, for instance? All of these things are ultimately outside of the individual's hands. But I think that's not in the space that we're playing per se. We're interested really in kind of how a grassroots organization and the people that are around you and the people that you connect with in a very real way, how those local cemented links can actually be beneficial to everyone. And what I would say is, while that's the community space is where our heart is, where the talks that we've been having and the partnerships that we have cemented among kind of councils, charities, and some corporates, we've been pleasantly surprised at those particular channels and sectors in how receptive they've been to just this type of idea. So I think it has bled up, and it has been a grassroots movement that has taken time to grow, but it's not just breaking through the glass ceiling, it's here to stay. And I think we're in a pivotal moment over these next 10 years where I think we will see a huge amount of change, because I think there's a particular recipe that you need for quick and constant change that actually becomes cemented. And I think that potent cocktail of pandemic mixed with proof of climate change. Look at the last week that we've had. Middle of June, it's been raining for 7 days, and the 7 days before that, it was the hottest summer that we've ever had, hottest week we've had this year. So it's those things that I think provide an empirical proof that helps everybody really understand. And I think that there is, as I say, this potent mix that will allow movement and change to happen maybe more rapidly than we think, but as quickly as we'd hoped for. So fingers crossed.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen a shift in consumer behavior as a result of pandemic. Like, people are way more interested in sustainability than they've ever been before. They're taking more of a keen interest in trying to understand what they can do as a household or as an individual. So you're right, it's the perfect recipe for, businesses like yourself, of course, to thrive. So now coming on to something a little bit much more broader, you can probably hear my cat in the background, something a little bit more broad is, so in one of our previous talks today, we were having a really healthy debate about when it comes to climate change, is it really up to the community to respond, or is it up to governments to respond? And before I kind of tell you how that debate panned out, I'm keen to hear your response.
I think clearly it's 6.5 dozen of the other. It's two sides of the same coin. I'll stop with the metaphors now. It's both. I think we are seeing the beginning stages of quite serious government change. I think you're clearly in a better position than I to be able to see whether that comment is even accurate. And I'd kind of push the question back to you: do you feel that you've seen enough from a government level to really warrant a significant change?
I think it's a yes and a no. So in certain areas, yes, and in certain areas, no. I do think sometimes that politicians and civil servants and people who work in, any of these areas, which are all kind of trying to tackle a humongous problem, they're not always going to get it right. So yes, things work in certain areas. Like, I think sometimes people are always surprised when I tell them, well, that 50% of Britain is powered on like non-combusting renewable energy. And they're like, no, really, I didn't even know that. And I'm like, well, yeah. But so I think sometimes, as well as citizens, we also aren't very well educated about really how our country runs, or how things are truly operating. So for me, I think it's a bit of both, right? Because if we are down in the community, people like you and me, and we're doing the various work that we're doing to build resilience within our communities, it could all be undone if someone brings in a legislation or something that doesn't really allow us to do those sorts of things. So it is a hand-in-hand effort. I think where we do get let down is when you're in your local constituents, or you have people who represent you at members of parliament, probably aren't doing as much as they could. And I don't know if that's just kind of a figurehead position that they hold, but maybe because people see inaction there, they assume that the rest of the system is pretty much broken. And I mean, we could get into all the politics of this, which I don't want to, but I think there is things being done. I don't think that there's enough things being done. And I think also when enough of those things aren't being done, we should be more resilient as communities to start doing those things ourselves. So, this that I think inspired me so much about you guys as a company was always like the things you said, helping communities produce their own food, their own power. I mean, even it kind of fits into the brand ethos, which is about when you move forward from just the consumer goods to like eat clean, care for yourselves, then it's power your homes, feed yourselves.
Yeah.
So all of those ethoses are so important, and I think one of the things you didn't actually mention in your perfect storm of ingredients is also there's just a general appetite for people to know that things they buy came from somewhere nearby to them or local. I mean, not that saying that every product has to be that way, but
Yeah.
I guess people want to know more about what they're consuming and how it's come to their homes. So I think that's also. So then another slightly different question would be, there's obviously lots of people who've sat through this pandemic with all sorts of ideas about what they could do to kind of support, whether that's start a business or, do what you do or do something community orientated. What would you say to those people who are kind of sitting on the fence, still trying to figure out whether they want to do something like this or not?
So I'm actually going to answer both questions, the one that you said previously and this one, because we've recently had an offer by a major council to launch with them within their space, and it was really started by members and communities within that council and their buying power that really enabled us to help feed 8,000 vulnerable families within that second pandemic period. And that's where the government and the council level actually got involved. And that's where they really became, where they really saw the long-term vision of what this could be. And to answer your second question of how people can help, now I'd of course say, come and join Society Company and buy all of your products from us. But that is one small way in which you can have an effect and actually see your effect, whether it's talking and launching this within your school, doing it as an individual in your particular borough, because the small purchases that you do have do build up and make a huge impact. I think from an individual and personal point of view, everybody has to come to a Damascus moment, I guess, when it comes to this type of issue of whether they're going to take a stand, where they are, which side of the fence. And I think if you're firmly in one particular side or camp, then I think the onus is on you to be able to take action in whatever way that you feel, whether that's voting with your wallet or voting at the ballot box or just voting with your feet and going to a protest. Now, I firmly believe that voting with your wallet is by far the most effective way to create change, but each one of them have their merits. Each one of them creates some drip that eventually becomes a wave. So I think it's a big part of this is around communicating where you are on the journey and hooking up really with organizations and people like ourselves to see where you can help and assist and really join a larger organization of like-minded people. And that's what I'd say would be the first steps.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. So I'm going to ask one more question and then I'm kind of going to open it up to the audience. So if you guys have any questions in the audience, you just post them into the chat and then I'll relay them to Seb. So the question I had was, and this is always just to test people's personalities and just kind of shed you in a slightly different light. if you could go to dinner with two other people you know and solve climate change, who would you go with? I love asking this question.
Well, I don't want to be a kiss ass, but I think I'd choose you.
I don't think you'd want to choose me, but okay.
Terrible. And so there's somebody that I traveled with years ago. He was the director of Kew Gardens, and when I was 18, he chose me to go and join him on an anthropological botanical mission into the Amazon to go study the Guarani. And it was there really that he'd been working in and around climate change and trying to sort of prove this from a scientific level for over the last kind of 30 years, and using his position and almost an OG of the movement. And he'd kind of got to the stage where he felt the tipping points had been reached, and that was over 10 years ago. And while I do still see him on a sort of mentorship basis, he is pivotal in regards to the experience that really changed the way that I look at the world. So I think, as he was at the beginning of my Damascus moment, I'd like him there at the end, where we solve everything over a bottle of wine.
I love that. Okay, brilliant. That would be a very interesting evening, I would have to say. I love how I said evening, like we're going to solve it in one evening, but okay.
Yeah.
So
can I ask a question in regards to how did that conversation end up when you were having it earlier in the day? Where did people come down on whether people should do more or government should do more, or either one of them doing enough?
It was quite interesting. You had someone very vocal in the audience who said that they felt, why wait for leaders? They didn't really refer to it as governments. It was more like just leaders in general. Why wait for leaders when, we can build resilience ourselves? And I suppose there is an element of truth to that. But for the most part, people also, some of the most interesting comments I got was that you want to be able to involve leaders because it doesn't matter how charismatic or successful a leader is, you want advocacy across all different platforms or places where, you want people to advocate for each other. Or at least in this case, it's important that we all advocate for each other because at the end of the day, this is our home. So there was this kind of general consensus where people did understand that you can't do this alone. Like everybody needs to kind of do it together and everyone has a role to play. But there were some very vocal people who did feel like, no, you don't need leaders. You don't need government. You can just do it all yourself, which I suppose if you're just going to go and live in a kind of separate society, then maybe that could work. But I don't see that working.
I mean, utopias have never ended up as such. If they had, exactly. We'd all be living there, correct?
Yeah.
And maybe kind of the point I wanted to make is that governments, if they're run well, I don't know where people come down on, whether we're run well or not, but they are, as institutions, risk averse, and they are there to serve the people. So it's not like the onus is on the people to show that something works, but they do need to clamor and fight and communicate for what they want, for it to be served to them in the correct way. And as an institution that's risk averse, the best way to do it, or to prove a point, is to show that it works at the grassroots level, and then show and ask for the support that you need. But that's where I feel that our big partnership with this council came from, was by small communities within that borough operating in a really small level, and all of which really wanted to give back to vulnerable families within the area.
Yeah.
The council took notice, and they were willing to kind of escalate this and want to do something across the whole council, to allow all residents to take part in something like this, because a community doesn't have to be small. It can be 150,000 people within a London borough, and how exciting that would be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think also I think it's often forgotten that if we knew which channels or which ways in which we have to work through these systems, then I think you can actually achieve really great success. So, and we can start talking about all these different community projects that have happened all across London with the support of the council. So yeah, I'm sort of with you that there is the symbiosis of both. So you have two questions from the audience. The first one, which says, when it comes to the SDGs, there is a consensus that companies have to contribute to all 17. But in your opinion, should SDGs be segmented for different industries, or do you think it's everyone's responsibility to contribute?
I'm not sure if one company could contribute to all.
No, I don't think so either.
Just based on the fact that they're fairly specific, and they're broad by their very nature to try and include, there's 17 of them, so they're trying to include the majority of industry and all the different subsections of that. Can you repeat one more time? Actually, I can read it.
You can read it, yeah.
I'm just checking I got it.
They're asking, in your opinion, do you think SDGs should be segmented for different industries, or do you think it's everyone's responsibility to contribute?
I think they're there as a guideline, and as such, companies coming towards it segment themselves into one, or dare I say all. I don't know a company that could do all 17, but I do think the segmentation happens from an internal conversation. Nobody's going to tell an exterior company, okay, you do this, this, and this now. It's really up to the company to really contribute to a subsection, and really try and approach those in the best manner that they see fit. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And I would also add to that and say that I think the SDGs were always developed to be almost a framework or a guideline. I don't think they were meant to be as prescriptive, but it would be impressive to see a company deliver all 17. That would be pretty cool. But I agree with you. I don't think you can. But that said, I don't think that, I don't think it's something you should enforce companies to do. I think as businesses, everyone, and Seb, I'm sure you'll agree with this, when you're an entrepreneur or when you're running a business, there's literally so many stakeholders you're trying to satisfy that even achieving something successfully for a handful of your stakeholders is really, a job well done. So I guess instead of really asking the question of which SDGs are all 17, it should really be about like what you guys are doing. Where do you know you can create impact? And then follow that route. If it aligns to a sustainable development goal, great, which most things will. If you make them impact focused, then I think they will. So next question we have, which is, have you received any acknowledgement, support, or praise from any of the local authorities in London? And do you feel that local authorities have a responsibility to promote more grassroots, like sustainable organizations to their constituents?
Yes, I do feel that local authorities have a responsibility to promote more sustainable grassroots organizations. I don't think that's currently in their framework as such, but just in the same way that we proved a point, I guess, on a smaller test bed of small communities within a borough, the local authority and borough took notice, with which we're going to prove that it works on that level, with which to prove to other local authorities. I think it's always better to show rather than tell. Boroughs are increasingly, there's a diaspora of different ways in which they communicate. I mean, you only have to look at the different ways that they recycle to understand quite how difficult it would be to communicate with all of them in one particular way. They are organizations that are distinct and separate, and the best way to operate with them is to show and prove that something works, and take that to them in a way that benefits them from a publicity point of view, because I don't believe that there's a organization, a community, or an institution that shouldn't be taking a sustainability, like a leadership role within sustainability right now. And if you can show and prove to them that, look, this works and you're going to get the credit, I think that that's the best way to approach it when it comes to local authorities. But we are at the beginning stages of this within one. So I'd love to connect, maybe 6 months down the line, and with a wonderful proof of concept, and tell you how it's been received by our other 9 target London authorities. So I'll
watch this space.
Yeah. I will not answer that question in its entirety.
No, but I think it is important, and I suppose maybe oftentimes you don't see local authorities or councils really endorse companies because I don't think they know that they exist, or I think sometimes local authorities and councils still have a not backward way of thinking, but there's also a journey which I think most of the public or world needs to go through around how we need to change. And it kind of goes back to the points you made, right? Like, we adapted to the pandemic forcefully. We know what we need to do to change, is whether we have the appetite to do it. So there's so much that needs to be addressed in also that area before you can actually get local authorities to even start endorsing. And I think people like you coming along give them a blueprint to kind of look at and go, okay, this is the kind of organizations we'd want to work with. So really positive that you're doing that. So I'm going to wrap it up with one last question. So when you're not being the MD of Soco or the society company, what are you doing to enjoy yourself? Like, what does Seb do when he's not being an entrepreneur?
So I've started as a point of principle to try and enjoy myself more now that the pandemic is over.
Good.
And yes, it has been, I don't know if anybody else had this, kind of getting back into a sort of social routine can be quite anxious for people, especially after such a time out. But what's really helped me actually is reconnecting with my friends who do these live music jams, and going to them and seeing my best friend kind of live draw them as they're playing, and to see this kind of latent well of creativity that seems to have come bubbling up, and to really feel London coming alive again has been a real blessing, actually.
Well, I think that's wonderful. Well, Seb, thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you for coming and sharing, Soco, the society company's vision, its journey so far. Hope we can have you back next year to kind of update people on how you've progressed. See if the local authorities have actually succumbed. I'm just kidding. But just, just as just a big thank you from all of us for always participating, always being a great sport, and doing your part to support at least the work that we do also for our climate action. So thank you so much, and it was just a pleasure to talk to you.
A pleasure, always a pleasure to spend some time with you, Namisha, and I will see you at that dinner table with serene pride.
Definitely.
Covered all over an evening's work. So thank you.
All right, take care.
Great questions, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.